thing. I have a graphic real quick that shows this. So this is really professionally done. I'm a professional artist. This is what I do full time. So you can see this is just what I'm the best at. Anyway, on the left here, you can see there's these two mountains. The highest point obviously is a mountain, right? That obviously counts. It's the highest point around. Everybody would agree that's a mountain. Prominence means if there's a ridge bump or some lower mountain connected to the bigger mountain, does it count? The general rule of thumb, and I don't even know where this comes from, somebody decided 100 years ago that this is going to be the rule and everybody just follows it, but it's just called the 300-foot rule. If a mountain rises at least 300 feet from its nearest bigger partner, it's considered a standalone mountain. Everybody would agree this mountain on the left is a mountain, even though it's technically smaller than what's on the ridge next to it. This little drawing I have on the right, you would basically call those two little points leading up to the bigger peak just a ridge bump. You know, those don't actually count. So that's where this prominence thing comes into play. And if you are going purely by prominence, there are 53 14ers. That's where that 53 number comes from. Where 58 and some of the other bigger numbers come from has to do with either mountains either being named officially by the USGS, by the government, basically said this mountain officially has a name, so we're going to count it. Or if there's mountains that are just grandfathered in, you know, they're considered these iconic mountains, like my intro slide that was set up at the very beginning of this presentation of the Maroon Bells, right? Everybody knows the Maroon Bells. They're some of the most iconic mountains in the world, let alone Colorado. I don't think you would catch too many people saying, oh, that's one mountain. You know, you look at those and it's pretty clearly those are two individual peaks. Those count as two mountains, but a little known fact is that North Maroon Peak is technically does not rise more than 300 feet from South Maroon Peak. So if you're going strictly by this 300-foot rule, the Maroon Bells are only one mountain, but a lot of people think that's kind of ridiculous. And so that's where that number 58 comes from. So 53 is if you're going by the book, and 58 means you're going by the book, plus you're adding in just some of the cooler other mountains that are also named officially by the government. It doesn't really matter what number you choose. I always tell people, you know, whether you choose 53, 54, 56, 58, whatever you want to do, just pick a list that makes sense for you and stick to it. You know, there aren't any like 14er police that are come knocking down your door that if you only did 53 peaks and that's the list that you chose, they're not going to tell you you haven't done them all or anything like that. So I would just say pick something that makes sense to you and go for it. I do think that 58 is probably the most commonly used number these days. It's kind of slowly transitioning that way. And most people who pursue all the 14ers use the number 58. Getting real quick into the difficulty rating system. And so you'll see this in guidebooks, you'll see it on websites. 14ers are generally ranked class 1 through class 5. Class 1 just simply means there's a trail the entire way. So from where you park your car to the end of your hike on the very summit, you are on a path. You know, they can be rocky, they can be dirt, whatever, but there is just a clear path that you are sticking on. There are very few 14ers that are actually class 1 the entire way. These ratings do work a lot like rock climbing, where it basically works off of whatever the hardest move is, or whatever if there's any sort of off-trail hiking involved, it'll be called class 2. So there could be a trail to within 50 feet of the summit, and then you have to jump over some talus for the last 50 feet. That trail will technically be considered class 2. The class 2, especially on 14ers, because they're so popular and crowded, it'll still feel like you're on a path for the most part. There will be cairns marking the route. There might be, in the case of Long's Peak, even, you know, they have like bullseyes and stuff painted on the rock. So even though class 2 is technically classified as off trail, on 14ers, these trails are generally pretty well marked. What that means generally is that you're going to be walking on rocks at some point instead of just a dirt or gravel trail. So class 1 and class 2 are basically just hiking. When you get up into class 3 and class 4, that's what's considered scrambling, which I'll get into in a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. But it's a very fine line between what that means. People always ask, oh, you know, I've done XYZ class 3 routes. When will I be ready for class 4? It's really hard, even for people that have been doing this for, you know, a decade like me, or even longer, to really even tell the difference. You know, class 3 and class 4, it's a gray fuzzy line between the two. The way I personally kind of tell the difference is that with class 3, I'm able to face out when I'm down climbing. I don't have to turn around and like face into the rock and down climb like you would a rock climbing route. Whereas class 4, I do have to turn around usually and search out for holds and try to find a way down. But honestly, climbing up class 3 and climbing up class 4 doesn't feel hugely different. I will say that class 3 is a little bit more, you're kind of using your hands more optionally for balance. You will still be doing some rock climbing moves. You're going to put weight on your arms and hands and stuff like that. But class 4 feels a lot more like rock climbing. You're actually looking for holds. You're having to stop and search and look around. Whereas class 3, everything's obvious. You're kind of just climbing up ledges and big jugs and big holds. Whereas class 4, you actually have to look and search around a little bit more. Instead of 10 different options, there might only be 1 or 2 different options. And then you do get into class 5 a little bit, especially if you're doing some of the alternate routes on 14ers, or if you're doing any of the classic, what's called the great traverses between some of these peaks. Like if you, just going back to the Bells, you know, the Bells traverse is considered a classic route where you climb to the top of one and then you just traverse the ridgeline to the other. And that can get into low class 5. But in general, if you are sticking to the standard routes, no 14er is harder than class 4. You don't need a rope for any of them. You don't need any special gear. You can climb all the 14ers basically with hiking equipment. You don't need anything extra. But there are obviously opportunities for harder routes and harder challenges. So using the list of 58, this is kind of how the 14ers break down. Most of them, I think a full 2/3 are considered walk-ups. That means they're class 1 or class 2. You can see the bulk of these are class 2, which means that they just have a little bit of off-trail or some off-trail hiking. And again, that could be, you're on a trail for the majority of the time and you get to the very top and there's a little bit of talus, a little bit of rocks. And so it's classified as class 2. So you can see you can do most of the 14ers without ever setting foot on any sort of scrambling route. So the key point here and the key takeaway, I think, is that especially if you're newer to hiking or newer to Colorado or newer to scrambling or mountaineering in general, there's opportunities to work your way up. If you're not sure, hey, I'm a little intimidated by class 3, I'm not sure if I'm there yet, go do 10 class 2 peaks. You know, there's plenty of opportunities to gain experience along the way. And then once you have, 10, 15, 20 peaks under your belt and you feel like you have this dialed in and you're ready to up the ante a little bit, then there's plenty of options for that too. But the 14ers are great. And I always kind of refer to them as like outdoors or mountaineering 101, because you can start with no knowledge. You can do the easiest 14ers with very, very little knowledge of mountaineering or climbing or hiking in general, and slowly work your way up. And then by the time you're finished, you kind of, you're a jack of all trades outdoors person. You can, the world's your oyster at that point. So I think that's cool. But yeah, the progression is real, and I would encourage everybody to just kind of work their way up at whatever speed they're comfortable. I always have to work into these 14-hour presentations, especially, every summer they're getting more and more crowded. There are more and more people that are hiking these peaks, and it's really important to make sure that we're managing our impacts on the backcountry. So this is my leave no trace slide, and specifically to 14ers, there's a couple of things I want to call out. If you're not familiar with Leave No Trace, just Google it. It's a whole organization, a whole other nonprofit that has great information about how to travel in the backcountry without damaging anything or much at all. It's kind of responsibly hiking and recreating outside. So it's really great to get familiar with some of their best practices. But again, specific to 14ers, I'm sure you guys have all seen, some people will get up on the summit and then they'll have their little sign that says Mount Bierstadt, 14,000 whatever feet, and they take their selfie or they have somebody take a photo, and then they'll leave the sign up there. And the rationale is, hey, this is something I thought was cool. My photo was cool, and I want to leave this for other people to enjoy, which seems altruistic until 15 other people have the same idea. And then you get to the top of Mount Bierstadt and there's 20 cardboard signs sitting up there that people have left behind, and all of a sudden it just becomes a pile of trash. So I encourage people, if you want to bring a cardboard summit sign or whiteboard or print out a piece of paper or whatever, it's totally worthwhile and cool to do. Just make sure you take it down with you. Don't leave it up there. Same thing goes with things like toilet paper, fruit peels and cores. That's really common to see, like apple cores and stuff on the side of the trail. Especially once you get up into the alpine, those do take a long time to decompose. And they don't weigh anything, and you can put them in a plastic bag, so there's no harm in just bringing it down with you. this has kind of come into play the past week or so as the monsoon has officially started. Some of these trails can be muddy or wet, and it's sometimes easy to say, you know, I have my brand new trail runners or my brand new hiking boots on, and I don't want to get wet and gross, especially in the morning and you know, the very beginning of a hike. And so you'll just kind of go around a mud puddle and think it's no big deal. And then again, you know, the 20 or 30 people behind you do the same thing, and all of a sudden there's a totally new side trail created next to the actual trail when all you had to do was get your shoes a little muddy. So if you do see mud or wetness or anything like that on the trail, the general etiquette is just to go through it. Don't go around it. Don't create new paths. Don't step on flowers or anything. And that this is important to call out too, especially you know, in these times with COVID-19 and the mask rules and everything. It happens a lot with people stepping off the trail to ensure their social distancing, or stepping off the trail to let people by. But you have to be really careful about where you're doing that, because you don't want to trample something like these beautiful flowers in this photo, you know, or step on some delicate tundra that takes years and years to recover. So if you do have to step off the trail, try to find places that people already have. You know, step off at the corner of a switchback, or where you see obvious, you know, just places where other people have already tread. The safest place to do it is on rocks. You know, do it on durable surfaces, and you can just, you don't have any worry about stepping on those. So if possible, just stay on those durable surfaces, or make room in another way. If you encounter wildlife, which happens commonly, especially like mountain goats and stuff like that, or marmots, or pikas, the little cute little like alpine mouse looking things, don't feed them, you know, kind of let them be, you know, take your pictures and check them out, but don't try to interact with them or give them food. Same thing goes with flowers, you know, try not to pick any flowers that you see, just take your pictures and remember them that way. And I do kind of challenge people too, because again, these peaks are getting more and more crowded. If you are up there, I guarantee you're going to see trash. You're going to see on the summit, on the side of the trail, you're going to see Snickers wrappers or goo gel wrappers or whatever. I always try to pick up at least one piece of trash whenever I'm hiking, and just add it to my personal little trash pile and pack it out. So if everybody made that a habit, you know, these places would get a lot more clean a lot quicker. So if you are out there doing this, you know, I encourage you to try and leave it, not just leave no trace, but leave it better than you found it, if at all possible. So the Colorado Mountain Club teaches something called the 10 Essentials, which is a great list of just what you should bring with you whenever you're entering the backcountry. I've modified it a little bit to create this list that I call the 14er Essentials. This covers most of the 10 essentials and plus a little bit more, so I'll just run through it real quick. The two most important things you have to bring, obviously, are food and water. I always tell people that for the easier, shorter hikes, that 2 liters is the minimum. Carry that with you. That's changing a little bit these days, now that, you know, stuff like those squeeze bottles and packable filters for the ultra runners and stuff. But you really have to plan out ahead and know that you're going to be encountering creeks and lakes and water sources and stuff. But you don't want to be caught out there without water, and I'll get into that a little bit more, talking about altitude sickness and stuff a little bit later. But my personal rule of thumb is I carry at least 2 liters, and for the longer hikes, I'll carry 3 or even 4, depending on how much I think I'll need for the day. And that's kind of a personal thing. Some people can hike for 15 hours and drink 1 liter. Some people drink 5 liters in 6 hours. You kind of just have to get out there, try your best, and kind of dial in what works best for you over time. But I think 2 liters minimum is kind of a good rule of thumb. Food, you know, I'd say this is your opportunity to eat all the junk food and terrible food and crap food that you don't let yourself at home. You want to eat food that tastes good up there. You know, my go-to are like Pringles and Snickers bars. A lot of people will bring, you know, the fancy protein bars or granola bars, and then you get up to 14,000 feet and it just feels like you're just shoving chalk into your mouth. So make sure you're bringing stuff that you know you're going to want to eat. Trail mix is great. Chocolate is great. Energy chews, energy gels, you know, it's kind of, again, it's very personal depending on each person, but make sure you're bringing stuff that you know, no matter what, you're going to want to take the time to eat. And again, that's kind of trial and error, but usually is an excuse to eat all the junk food you want. Sun protection, you know, that just means basically sunscreen and a hat. The higher you get, and especially as you get on these summits at 14,000 feet, the sun just gets stronger. It's very easy to get sunburned. You know, especially if you're wearing shorts or something like that. Make sure you hit your legs with sunscreen too. There's nothing worse than being sunburned like at the crease of your knee for the next week. So it's very, very important to keep that in mind and reapply every 2 or 3 hours. Additional layers, we don't get a ton of rain in Colorado, but it's always nice to have at least a rain jacket and probably rain pants, because if you do get caught out in it, it's very easy, especially at altitude, to develop hypothermia real quick. You can go from sweating bullets on a 60-degree day to a storm rolls in, all of a sudden it's 40 degrees and rainy, and you're quickly going hypothermic. So it's important to carry those waterproof layers, and then at least one, probably 2 insulating layers. So that just means a mid-layer jacket, some sort of over-it-all down puffy or synthetic puffy for the summits or rest breaks or stuff like that. I generally carry a t-shirt, a fleece layer, a rain jacket, and some sort of just over-it-all puffy, kind of down sweater type jacket that I know is going to keep me warm no matter what. The 10 essentials, getting to point number 5, usually says map and compass. And while those are great skills to learn, and the CMC continues to teach those, we are also cognizant that it's 2020 and people have apps and stuff like that they use. All Trails and Gaia GPS and CalTopo are all great. So if you're going to bring those for navigation, just make sure that you're minding your battery and that you're able to keep using it all day. Keep it in airplane mode, close all your other apps and stuff like that. But these things really help. Do your research beforehand. Go read a guidebook, preferably from CMC Press. Go to 14ers.com and read about these routes. Just spend 10 or 15 minutes doing some pre-research, and it'll alleviate a lot of the issues that you might encounter later on the trail. 14ers.com also has route descriptions you can print out. They have an app that you can use and download for offline use. So there's really no excuse for ever getting lost on these peaks. The information is out there. You just have to take a little bit of time before your hike to do the research and make sure you have your navigation ready to go. Headlamp is great for early mornings. Some of these mountains you'll be starting very early. If you're doing a long hike and you're racing these afternoon thunderstorms, which again, I'll get into weather here in a second, you're probably going to be starting before dawn. So you might need your headlamp for the first hour or two you're hiking. It's also a great emergency tool. If you get stuck out on a mountain overnight, or you're delayed, or you're running late, you don't want to get stuck out in the backcountry without a light. So a headlamp is something you should always carry year-round, no matter what hike you're planning. You never know what's going to happen, and a light source it can be life or death. So always carry a headlamp. First aid kit, again, you can buy a prepackaged, very lightweight first aid kit, or if you take something like wilderness first aid or wilderness first responder classes, you'll likely end up with something that weighs significantly more. But no matter what it is, make sure you're bringing at least a basic first aid kit for yourself. Everybody on a hike should carry, again, at least a very minimal first aid kit with everything you might personally need to patch yourself up. For a backpack, you can get away with lighter. A lot of ultra runners and stuff like that will do these with just a hydration pack, and that's fine. I recommend for general hikers to aim for something 18 to 35 liters. And that's just enough to carry all of the stuff on the 14er essential list, probably with some extra room. Other stuff I might need, that's a fire starter, some tenacious tape in case I get a rip in my pants, a knife, extra batteries for my headlamp and stuff like that. And that's just a mesh bag. I have all that stuff in that I bring on every single hike, whether it's a day hike or a 14er or whatnot. A positive attitude, you'd be very, it sounds like I'm some self-help guru up here or something, but what I really mean by that is that these experiences are what you make them. If you're going at it and you're saying, oh my God, I haven't hiked that much, and this 14er is killing me, and I'm so tired, and I'm so out of breath, and I'm so miserable. If that's your mindset, you're going to have a bad time. So even if it's hard, if it's something that you're really struggling with, keep in mind that you're on a 14er and you're able to stop and look around. There's no race. I guarantee you that if you're trying to set some sort of fastest known time or race people up the mountain, there are plenty of people that are faster and better than you. So it's no skin off your back to just hang out, take a break if you need it, look around, enjoy the scenery. There's no reason to force yourself to be miserable. Have this positive attitude and look at it as for what it is, and that you're enjoying a great day outside. Whether you make the summit or not, you're definitely going to have a good experience, and you're definitely going to get great views. So look at it that way. Just treat it as something that's just fun and enjoyable. And then the question I always ask myself, and again, this is if I'm going on a hike around Golden after work, or if I'm going on a 5-day backpacking trip, it's the stuff I'm carrying in my pack. If I break my ankle and I'm by myself, am I going to be okay until somebody comes to rescue me? And if I can answer that question yes, then I'm ready to go. And if I answer that question no, then I look at what else I might need. So for some people that means carrying something like a bivy sack, or even extra layers than we've already talked about. This goes into carrying maybe a personal locator beacon, like an ACR, like a Garmin InReach or something like that, to make sure you're safe, or leaving an itinerary with your loved ones, or a friend or whoever you trust to take care of stuff if you're overdue. So just always be thinking about that. And that's why I always get a little itchy when I see, especially people like ultra runners or people new to 14ers that are out there, 10 miles into the backcountry with a goo gel and half a liter of water. And it's like, that's fine, you can move fast, but what if something happens? And I can guarantee you at some point, if you do this long enough, something will happen. So it's always important to just keep that in mind and make safety a top priority. Those were kind of essentials. And just real quick on a little bonus gear note, and my first introduction to my dog's fluffy little butt, you're welcome. Boots versus trail runners. If you're sensing a recurring theme here, it's personal preference. I'm a trail runner guy. I know plenty of people that swear by hiking boots. It generally has to do with what you're most comfortable in, what your feet are most comfortable in. A lot of people that have trouble with rolling ankles or weak ankles, or knees or sciatica or whatever, have to wear hiking boots. Other people, swear by the lightness of trail runners. So it's really personal preference. Both work. If you're brand new to this and you're not sure, I would say go to an REI or that kind of place, try it on, and just give it a go, see what might work for you. But there's really no way to know until you've been doing this for a couple of years what your preference might be, and you've really tried multiple types of both styles of shoe. The good news is you guys at VF over there have plenty of shoes and boots to try on. So trekking poles are something that, especially as I get older, as I get into my mid-30s, I don't leave my trekking poles behind ever. But I thought they were kind of nerdy when I was in my early 20s. But they're life-saving. They're great. They'll save your knees for descent, especially if you get into some of the class 2 routes where you're spending a lot of time on talus and scree and like less stable hiking surfaces. The trekking poles are really worth their weight in gold. I recommend them to everybody, no matter your age. They're totally not nerdy at all. Really cool. So I highly recommend trekking poles. You will need a helmet for anything class 3 or above, and that's generally just because some of these routes can get pretty loose, and it's pretty common for rocks to come flying down at you. And obviously you want to have a helmet on if you're in any sort of rock fall danger. If there's any chance of a fall or of rocks coming down, you're definitely going to want a helmet. And you will see some people on class 3 without one, but it's generally best practices to always carry a helmet, and especially coming from the CMC, we preach safety, and a helmet's definitely something to carry for scrambling routes. You will not, unless you're doing an alternate route or something harder where you're purposely seeking out a harder challenge, you will never need a rope, again, on the standard routes for 14ers. And a dog is always a good companion. Just some quick notes on weather, and this goes back again to those 14er essentials, is that you have to be prepared for anything. I've been on summits that were bluebird and sunny and beautiful, and then 20 minutes later you're in a snowstorm and it's 35 degrees and the wind is blowing at 25 miles an hour. This photo actually was taken on one of those days. This photo was taken, I think, in late September of one year, where we can generally count on good weather throughout September. But this storm just kind of rolled in. It was totally unforecast. This day was supposed to be sunny and beautiful all day. We did not expect snow. We didn't expect wind. But there you go. So these mountains are big enough. A lot of times they'll create their own weather. So you really have to be prepared for anything. And that means resisting the impulse to skimp on gear. It's easy, especially in Colorado, where we don't get a ton of rain, to say, oh, I've done 20 14ers. I've never needed a rain jacket. I'm going to leave my rain jacket behind. But the second you start doing that, I guarantee you're going to get rained on that hike. So always carry it with you. When you need that stuff, you're going to need it. In the summer here, Colorado gets some of the monsoon that comes up from Arizona. And so you'll hear people talk about afternoon thunderstorms and monsoon thunderstorms. And basically what that means is that in the mountains, especially, every afternoon you can pretty much count on some sort of scattered rain or scattered thunderstorms. And you really don't want to be caught out on a summit or ridge lines or anywhere exposed when there's a chance of lightning. There's a handful of deaths and accidents on 14ers every year. Maybe 10 or 12 deaths a year, I think, is the average. And a high proportion of those are lightning strikes. When you're out there and you're the highest point on a ridgeline or the highest point on a summit, you are literally a lightning rod. So it's really important to start early and especially get down early. The rule of thumb is to be off the summit by noon. But like all rule of thumbs, it's imperfect. So it's really important to kind of have your head on a swivel, look around, look at what the weather's doing to you or doing around you. What you really want to pay attention for is clouds, white puffy clouds that are building up. If they're getting taller and taller and taller while their bellies are getting darker and darker and darker, before long, that's most likely going to turn into a thundercloud. So that's what you're really looking out for. We do have pretty accurate forecasts in Colorado, which is great. As long as you check the day or maybe 2 days beforehand. They do tend, if you get into the long-term forecast, they change drastically. So I often don't even bother checking weather for a planned hike until the day beforehand. But weather.gov is a great resource. Open Summit is a great app. If anybody's a skier or snowboarder, Open Summit is from the same folks that do Open Snow, which is like the best weather forecast for the winter around here. Mountainforecast.com is another one. Or if you go to 14ers.com and click on the weather tab, they've actually preset for each summit, they have a pinpoint forecast. So you can just go in and select the peak you're going to do, and it'll tell you exactly for that summit, for that area, what the forecast is going to be. Yeah, I would say depending on the hike, your start time will vary with the goal of being on the way down, if not back down to tree line by noon. So that'll fluctuate whether you're starting at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning. Just try and plan, knowing your own pace and how long you think it'll take you to make sure that you're not on those summits or not on those ridge lines as some of those afternoon storms start building up. So we're getting into scrambling here. This is again class 3 and class 4. So this is a famous route called Kelso Ridge on Torrey's Peak. This is a little mini knife edge very near the top. As you can see, these two climbers here are wearing helmets, as you should on class 3. But the important thing to know for scrambling is that, again, you really need to build up your progress and until you feel comfortable with it. Once you're comfortable and this is your element, it's pure fun. But you want to make sure that you've worked your way up. Some people they have to do all the class 2 14ers before they feel ready. Other people will say, well, I'm a rock climber. I want to challenge myself. I'm going to go out and hop on this scramble right away. And that could work for both people. It's kind of up to individuals as to when you're ready. But I will say scrambling is what makes these fun. It's kind of a hybrid between hiking and rock climbing. You get to do a lot of the fun moves and body positions that you would rock climbing without the need or the consequences of a rope or a high risk fall. So it really is just pure enjoyment once you're ready for it. I'm not sure I have a slide on this real quick. So before I jump into some recommendations on your first 14er, I will say for altitude sickness and just dealing with the altitude, it's once again something that varies more and more, or varies person to person. Somebody can come here straight from Florida and have no issue, or somebody can live in Salida their entire life and get a headache every time they go above 12,000 feet. It's kind of there's no way to tell whether you're going to struggle with it or not. But the best way to prevent any sort of altitude illness or sickness or trouble is just to make sure that you're eating and hydrating. If you're expending a lot of effort and you're sweating and you're burning a bunch of calories and you're racing up to the top of one of these 14ers and you're not replenishing your fluids or replenishing your energy or putting energy into your body, it's a pretty common scenario that's called bonking. As soon as your body all of a sudden runs out of energy and you just feel like you're dragging, like you can barely put one foot in front of the other, you can't catch your breath. And that's kind of the first stages of some of these issues. And then they can develop pretty quickly into some serious illnesses that can even be life-threatening. If you have acute mountain sickness, that's kind of the first stage of some really scary physical issues or ailments that can come about. So if you're experiencing any form of altitude sickness, which is basically to say if you're having a headache, shortness of breath, nausea, you know, stop, eat and drink, and if you don't feel better, start heading down. The only way to really cure altitude sickness is to get to a lower elevation. So it's something that you're going to want to be monitoring, and you're going to want to really pay attention to, and monitor your partners too, because a lot of times somebody can be slurring their words or losing their balance, or kind of you know, exhibiting symptoms without themselves even knowing it. So it's really important to monitor your partners and monitor yourself. And if you're experiencing any form of altitude sickness, to the very least stop, eat and drink. And if you're still not feeling better after a little while, to head on down. So real quick for first 14ers, I'm sure people have already noticed I've omitted some pretty obvious ones from this list, and that's on purpose. I can tell you to go do Mount Bierstadt. I can tell you to go do Grays and Torreys. But honestly, they're not the best first experience. They're not great first 14ers just because that's the first 14er that everybody does. They're going to be really, really crowded, even more so than the other 14ers. You're going to be doing it with 300 or 400 of your closest friends, which can be a great experience. You know, if you really want to do Grays and Torreys or really want to do Bierstadt, I encourage you to do so. But there are some options here that are easier, that require really just a little bit more of a drive, that you might have a little bit better of an experience on. So Quandary Peak, honestly, is probably just as crowded as those ones I just named, but it's a cool route. It's a fun mountain. I personally probably do Quandary at least once a year. There's just something about it that's a little bit more fun. Huron Peak is in the Saguache. It's near Buena Vista, Leadville area. That's beautiful. It has some of the best views of any 14er, especially in some of these northern ranges. So Huron Peak is a favorite. Great for wildflowers too, so it would be great if you're looking for something to do this weekend. Huron Peak would be great. Handies and San Luis are farther away. They're in the San Juan range, so these are going to at least require probably a 5 or 6 hour drive. So we're talking about a full weekend to do those. But they're just as easy, if not easier, than Grays and Torreys, Bierstadt, Quandary, you know, all the other beginner ones. But you're going to see far fewer people. If you do San Luis Peak, I would be surprised if you saw more than 10 or 15 other people on the route. It's just, well, it's getting more crowded now, but still, compared to some of these other 14ers, it is far, far less crowded. So if you're really just looking to go out and say, I want to do my first 14er, I want the best experience I can possibly have, I would really recommend Handies or San Luis. And Humboldt Peak is a great spot for anybody in the Colorado Springs too. It's in the Sangre de Cristo range, so it's a little bit closer. You can be at the Humboldt trailhead in probably 2.5 or 3 hours from Denver, so it's not quite as far of an experience. But again, all of these are just as manageable statistics wise, you know, in terms of mileage and elevation gain, than some of the other more obvious first 14ers in the Front Range. And the experience is just going to be a little bit better. This photo here is actually from very near the summit of Humboldt Peak, and it has great views. The two mountains you can see in the background are Crestone Needle and Crestone Peak. This is, again, one of the best summit views you can have, and it's a lot of bang for your buck. It's not that difficult of a hike, and you get these like stellar mountain views just right in your face. And then just to swing on the opposite side of the spectrum here, these are kind of the infamous 6, and these are the hardest 6. These are the ones that people obsess about. The peak in view here is Capitol Peak. You can see the entire route. Basically, you can see the knife edge and the last little bit to the summit. These mountains pretty much all require class 4 by the easiest route. But what really makes them dangerous isn't the difficulty of the climbing or the terrain. It's that everything's just loose. These mountains want to crumble. They are crumbling. And so there's a lot of rockfall danger, loose rock danger. So it's really something you have to manage and go slow. The moves and the climbing aren't really all that difficult, but they can get dangerous when you get into the loose rock, and especially, you know, something like the knife edge, which you can see here on Capitol. The consequences can be dire. You know, you're over a ton of exposure, and it's hiking and climbing that you might not think twice about if you were doing it in the, you know, if it was fake rock in the REI parking lot or something. But when you're hanging over 2,000 feet of exposure, it gets a lot more scary. A lot of these mountains have kind of famous features that people obsess about. Like Pyramid Peak has something called the leap of faith where you're on this like ledge that you have to step over, that there's about 300 or 400 feet of exposure. And it's really just a step. It's maybe 2 or 3 feet across, but because it's there, you know, people obsessed about it. I will say, as your experience grows, you know, it's something that you get up there and you think about these things and you read about these things and you get there, and these things are very rarely as big or as hard as you think about it in your head. I think more often than not, you get up there and you look at it and you say, oh, that's it. This is what I've been reading about and obsessing over for a week. But these are all mountains to take seriously. People have and do get seriously injured or die on these peaks fairly frequently. So I would suggest saving these until you're really confident in your abilities and you're really confident in your techniques and processes, and you've done enough 14ers to know how much water to carry and what food you like and what emergency gear you need. You know, these are kind of the expert level that you want to save for when you're fully confident in your skills. I will say that these also have the tendency to be some of the most fun. You know, I did another lap on Sunlight Peak a week ago. You know, and it's fun climbing. You know, they're scary, but it's enough just to get your adrenaline going and enough to feel like a challenge. But that's all subjective. You know, what's a challenge to one person could be super easy to another, or vice versa. So it's really getting to know yourself and working your way up and deciding how you want to handle these hardest peaks. And then just real quick, you know, as the 14ers get more popular, and especially as they're more documented, you know, as they're more on all trails and all those apps we were talking about earlier, it seems to be an evolving trend of people that just say, oh, I want to do a hike this weekend. It looks like I'm staying in Leadville for the weekend with some friends, and All Trails says that there's this 14er that's 2 miles from our campsite. We're just going to go do it. And I think that you do have to have a little bit more respect than that. You have to do a little bit more research, be a little bit more prepared, because a lot of the accidents, especially the serious ones that do occur on the 14ers, a lot of them are traceable to just a lack of preparation and awareness. So do treat these seriously, even though they are very commonly done. You know, most 14ers now, you know, you'll see on a summer weekend dozens, if not hundreds of people. So it kind of lures you into this false sense of security of like, oh, I'm surrounded by all these other people, everything will be fine. But these are very, you know, can be dangerous endeavors. I've personally, in 10 years of doing this, I've been the first responder to 3 fatal accidents, one of which was a close friend. So I always caution people to, no matter how easy you think it is, or how well documented the route is, you know, if there's 20 new All Trails ratings in the past week and you're like, oh, this looks super easy and straightforward, still do your research, carry your extra gear, leave an itinerary, or carry something like a Garmin InReach or other personal locator beacon. It's very important to take these mountains seriously and treat them with respect, because if, you know, it doesn't take much. It's just one little slip or one little accident and things can get dangerous in a hurry. So you want to be as prepared for that as possible. And so that wraps up my little intro. Thank you guys for coming. I'll stick around for some questions here. But yeah, if you're not familiar, that cmc.org is our main website. That's where you can check out all the membership information. cmcpress.org is our web store where you can get our guidebooks, including the 14er guidebooks and such. So without further ado, I'll just turn it back over and open it up for questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jeff. Thank you guys all for tuning in. I don't have a ton of questions in the chat box, but if you guys want to post any, there was a lot of chat, Jeff, of the best electrolyte tablets. Lots of debate. What are your favorite?
I don't have a lot of brand loyalty. I don't think. I usually get whatever's on sale. I do like news, especially if you're filtering water. If you're filtering water on the go, or planning to stop and replenish your water, a lot of times carrying an electrolyte tablet or even just like Gatorade powder or something like that can help the water taste a little better.
Jeff, Maddie,
Awesome.
do you guys have info if people aren't comfortable going by themselves or with someone else? Is there a way to utilize CMC to sort of take advantage of your first 14er or going on the Kelso Ridge or something like that? How would people take advantage of you guys in order to achieve something like this?
Yeah, super glad you asked. We actually recently just launched our Colorado High Peaks section. So the high peaks basically include all of those 14ers Jeff was talking about, and it also includes the 13ers, because a big objective that a lot of Coloradans also like to do is completing the Centennial Peaks, which does include the 13ers, because it's the 100 highest peaks. So yeah, that just got launched, and they're leading everything from Bierstadt to scrambles on Kelso to traverses. So that's going to be really awesome. Jeff is also a trip leader for them. So you could even go on a trip with Jeff, get the absolute honor to get to climb with him. So that just got launched. So if you guys if you're already a CMC member, you can add the subscription to your profile. It's free. And if you guys have any questions about it, Jenny can point you in my direction. I can get you guys set up with that.
And just to piggyback off that for a second, the Denver group of the CMC has a really cool program that they do called Ascending Hikes, where their goal is basically to take somebody who, assuming no knowledge, and build them up with the end goal of doing a 14er. So you basically do hikes with the CMC where you're doing longer and longer hikes. You start with something in the foothills, then you do something that's 6 miles, and you do something that's 8 miles, and then you go do a 14er at the end. It's a really cool program they've set up that's kind of meant to build in that progression.
That's great. I especially think with quarantine, since we've all been a little bit more sedentary.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Shave off the quarantine pounds and go climb 14er.
Anything else? No. So if anyone is interested in taking advantage, like we said, we only have a couple more memberships left. Check out the Denver Loop page. And then if you haven't renewed, if you signed up last year, I know I just renewed my membership, so we do encourage you guys to take advantage and go and renew your membership. Keep supporting our community. But if you guys don't have any other questions, or if the group doesn't, we thank you again. I love learning from you guys, so we appreciate you taking your time.
Of course, you guys. We love VF, so thank you guys.
All right, everyone.
There's a quick question that I can answer quickly. Is the slide deck going to be available? I'm sure Jeff wouldn't mind sharing that with me so I could share it with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll make sure to post it, Adam, on the Denver, we'll attach it to the Denver download on Monday. And then if anyone wants it, reach out to me and I can send it to you guys.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.